Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1980 horror cult exploitation film Maniac. I warned you not to go out tonight. Now, Maniac to me is honestly one of the best slashers of the 1980s and one of my favorite horror films. It's not a movie that I would watch over and over again because it's not really a film that really benefits from that, because it's not something that is an experience that you want to experience that many times consecutively, because it's not what I would call a fun film to watch. But the reason why it's one of my favorite horror films is because it is one of the most effective horror films. It's one of the most effective horror films when it comes to creating a consistent sense of dread and doom, and just really delivering when it comes to what makes a horror film scary. It sticks with you. It's the kind of thing that could give you nightmares because it's somewhat close enough to reality in terms of the approach of the film and the authenticity of things, that it genuinely unsettles you and it makes you uncomfortable. It makes you not want to go out tonight. And that's really, in a lot of ways, a definite showcase of the film's strength and the film's power. It's directed by William Lustig, who prior to this directed a couple porno films, and this was, by all intents and purposes, his directorial debut. Because, yeah, he directed some films before this, but they were porn films, they were low-budget porn movies. That's not really the same as a feature-length film. And you really could not tell that this is a guy who had not been doing films in this capacity for many, many years, because it seemed like he was an absolute natural already. I feel that he did a really magnificent job with this film. He really created a sense of mania that really wound up overwhelming the viewer at times, and really just got to you. It got under your skin. And it got under your skin in ways that was genuinely creepy because of the camera techniques that were used, certain juxtapositions of POV shots of the killer mixed in with other more creative uses of the camera or perspective. He used slow-mo really well. There was a particular death scene in the subway that used the slow-mo in a very effective way. And there's a lot of shots in this film that are shot guerrilla style because Lustig did not have permits to shoot in New York because he could not afford it. So there's a lot of times in the film where there are sequences that were shot on the spot and under a significant crunch time because of the fact that we got to get this shot now before the cops come. And what's really amazing is that there really aren't any scenes in this film that feel like William was under that pressure. So it still feels like things are structured and things have a well-laid plan, despite the fact that things are really chaotic and crazy because of the fact that William had to run from one shooting location to the next, and sometimes shoot things back to back to back all in one night. So it doesn't really have that feel to it, and it easily could have if you had a worse filmmaker. Could have looked like it was rushed, or somebody just shot something really quickly and then got out of there. but that's not the case with the film. He also shot Tom Savini's gore effects in ways that were very lurid and very vivid and very intense. And all in all, it's a very magnificent and just really well done film when it comes to the direction. It's very gritty, it's very grimy, it's very sleazy looking, and very authentic. There are times where it seems like it almost has this documentary kind of look to it, like the day in the life of a psycho in New York City. But then there's other times where it's more uh, over the top, maybe isn't the right word, but it's definitely more creative. It's definitely more imaginative in terms of the way that the shots are set up, like the nightmare scenes, for instance, and some of the other sequences at night. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a terrific film when it comes to the direction by William Lustig. He's a big reason why the film is as good as it is. Another reason why the film works is the script by C.A. Rosenberg and Joe Spinell. In a lot of ways, this is Joe Spinell's baby. It's based on a story by Joe Spinell. It's something that he really wanted to do. And there are other films that came out after Maniac that had this approach of the perspective of a killer. But around the time that this film came out, it was a lot more unique than the norm when it comes to these kind of films. This is a film that focuses mainly on the perspective of the maniac. There are not any sequences that focus on the perspective of some other characters or people who are investigating the murders. It's strictly from the point of view of the maniac. And that really made the film unique when it comes to the story. It made it unpredictable at times because, in a lot of ways, Frank is not a very reliable narrator. He's not a very reliable person. So there are moments where things will jump and you'll have one day go into another or so on. But it was done in a way that was still really satisfying because it could have been one of those things where it has all the kills and all the violence early on in the movie, blows its wad, and doesn't balance things out properly. But that's not the case with the film here. It balances out the kills really well, starts out with a nightmare sequence, ends with a nightmare sequence that even tops the nightmare sequence that started the film. And then in the middle, you have various different sequences of Frank Cito stalking and killing his victims. The first victim that you see him kill for real is some woman who's strangled. And even then, there's moments where he's not very reliable as a narrator because he's hallucinating that he's strangling his mother instead of strangling the hooker. And further on, he goes and continues his killing spree and stalks some woman in the subway. And he also starts a romantic relationship with this woman named Anna. Now, I know I've seen some people say that they think this isn't really that effective because they don't buy Joe Spinell whining and dining a beautiful woman, and I get it. But that's part of the charm for me. That's part of what makes this story stand out because of the fact that it's such a unorthodox series of scenes. It's an unorthodox thing to happen, to see this fat, sweaty, pit-faced schlub of a man get a supermodel and actually get her to trust him enough to go out on dates and fall in love with him. And I think the script did a good job making that believable, at least for me personally. No, it's not as strong of a connection as other films, but I bought it because of the way that it's set up from the point of view of the woman. I bought that she didn't see Joe Spinell as too much of a threat, because at that time, when they were conversing with one another, he wasn't really showing the signs of being a maniac just yet. He was actually showing a little bit of charm because of his confidence. He was very confident. And I think that is what really drew Anna to Frank. I also like how it showcases different forms of Frank's mania. So you'll see him just sitting there in a chair with a wind up toy from Christmas, and just thinking about the past, and having PTSD. And I thought that was interesting. And then there's other moments where he has a breakdown and starts talking about his mother. And I like how the film also has a lot of different forms of slaughter. That was something that was different too, and helped the film stand out from other slashers, because he doesn't just kill people with knives. He doesn't just scalp people and put their scalps on mannequins. He actually goes in and blows people's heads off with shotguns. And it was different, to show that this is a maniac who isn't just stuck with one form of killing. It helped the film be more unpredictable. It helped the film flow better, because there are moments where it never really got monotonous. It didn't become predictable, because it would always have a different form of killing. So you would have the knife, you would have the strangling, you'd have the shotgun. So there was a variety of kills throughout the film. And the one thing, though, that I didn't really like about the movie was the ending. I love the nightmare sequence. I love the idea of his victims coming to life and tearing him apart. I love that. I thought that was poignant. I thought it was really strong. I thought it was ironic. It was great. It was brilliant. It was a great way to have this vicious killer disposed of. But then they make it so it's just a nightmare, and he's still alive, because they were trying to set up some sequel that never happened. And I just would have preferred it to have ended on that note, where his victims come to life and rip him to shreds, and that's it. He's dead. There is no way around it. The terror is over. And so on. I get maybe why they wanted to do that, because they wanted to make you uh really aware that this killer is not dead, and he's still out there. And I get it. I get what they were trying to do, but I just think it would have been more effective if it ended on that note, when he gets ripped apart, because it's other than the shotgun blast scene, it's the most impactful scene of violence in the film. So I think that would have been a good way to end the film. So overall, I think the script is pretty solid. I think it's a good script. The cast, it's really a two-person show when it comes to the majority of the scenes. uh, Joe Spinell and Caroline Munro. There are a few other actresses, like Gail Lawrence as Rita, Kelly Piper as the nurse, Rita Montone as a hooker, Tom Savini himself, who plays the guy who gets his head blown off in genuinely spectacular fashion, because it's a spectacular makeup effect. Uh, Hyla Marrow plays his girlfriend. James Brewster plays a guy on the beach in the beginning. Linda Lee Walter plays another person on the beach, who is the beach girl. Um, Nelia Bachmeister, who plays Frank's mother. But for the most part, it's Joe Spinell and Caroline Munro. And Joe Spinell is absolutely mesmerizing at times. And maybe that's not the best word to use, but I actually think it works because you can't take your eyes off of this performance because it's just so compelling and so strong. He really went out there with this. He completely embodied the role of this psycho to the point where you were genuinely scared of him. You did not want to go out. You did not. Like, after this movie was over, you're like, I don't want to go out tonight because I'm afraid I might run into Joe Spinell. So it's one of those things where it has everything that you want out of a central performance for a film of this caliber. You want a performance that is striking. You want a performance that's vicious and angry and violent and multifaceted. And I thought Joe Spinell was just fantastic. I don't think he gets enough credit. I thought it was honestly one of the best cinematic psycho performances out there. And I don't think he got enough credit, period, for his acting anyway. And I think this is his finest hour, his tour de force when it comes to his acting. And a lot of it is because he bought into it and he had so much passion for the role, so much passion for the film. And it really does pay off. He was not afraid to be down and dirty and get greasy and get grimy and really show himself in a very unflattering light. Caroline Munro, on the other hand, is the opposite. Like, flattering is an understatement when it comes to this woman. And she was only in it because one of the main financiers who rounded up $200,000 to throw into the film's budget pretty much put it in the contract. It's like, hey, you gotta have my woman in it. And they're like, sure. And it worked out perfectly because Caroline Munro has that ethereal beauty to her, and it really made the dynamic between her and Joe Spinell even more interesting because of the fact that she just seems so unattainable for someone who has the appearance that Frank Zito has in this film. The rest of the cast are fine. They do okay with what they're asked to do. They're not great actors, but they don't have to be because it just adds to the authenticity of the film. Like you're actually there watching these murders happen. And a lot of them were porn actors or actresses because it was cheaper to get those actors than it was to get anyone else. And that actually led to the authenticity of the film too, because you had these actors who weren't really that great at acting because they're really more suited for other kinds of acts. And it just made things feel more real and even more gritty. The film also features a score by Jay Chataway. This score, in my opinion, is so ahead of its time because a lot of scores years later, especially in the 2000s, would be very atmospheric and be very dissonant and be very synth heavy. And this is a score that in a lot of ways predated a lot of that music. It's very synth heavy, it's very weird and very surreal and nightmarish and uncomfortable. It really did add a lot to this film because there's a lot of scenes in this movie that just get to you and get under your skin even more because of the score, because it's just so wild and legitimately difficult to listen to at times, but not because of the fact that it's so poorly put together, but because of the fact that it just makes you feel a certain way. It creates a certain vibe that's very unsettling. It also featured some really excellent cinematography by Robert Lindsay. The shots of New York City at night with the smoke and the fog and Joe Spinell just standing there. The nightmare sequence at the end, the way that was lit, the sequences in Joe Spinell's apartment, in Frank's apartment complex, the way that those scenes were lit, just a really well shot film despite the subject matter. Uh, and it was a well edited film too by Lorenzo Marinelli. There's a lot of shots in this that could have been really choppy, could have been really rough around the edges, but they still look very uh, well put together. They look polished despite how gritty and sleazy and grimy the overall film is. And I want to give a lot of credit to the production designers and the art directors for this film because I love the work that they did for Frank's apartment. There's all these little things in there that really draw your eye to where he lives. And it's not just the mannequins with the scalps that are stapled to their heads and so on. It's little things like a plaster screaming face that's on the doorway, or other weird bits of artwork, like that baby and that really cryptic, weird writing on it, and just a lot of this stuff that just really puts you in his world in a way that is almost as if you're a fly in the wall. Like you're right there with Frank, and you can almost smell the rotting flesh or his pit sweat, that kind of stuff. And I felt that it was just a really effective way to use the environment as its own character, because there's a lot of different things in this apartment that just really intrigue you. You're like, okay, what is that? Like, oh, what the hell is that about? Like, man, that's really disturbing. What the hell is that photo? That photo of that baby with a giant head and shit. Like, there's a lot of stuff where you're like, yeah, I can buy that this guy is a total fucking nutcase because just look at his fucking apartment. Um, and I don't really know what else to say about the film except it's a great example of doing more with less. This is a film that only cost $350,000. In fact, it was originally going to cost even less, but the filmmakers and Joe Spinell and a lot of other people involved with it, they put their money into the stock market and it paid off, and they wound up with like double or triple the money. But then they got an independent an investor to come in and give them more money, so then they were able to do even more with it. And even though they still only got $350,000, they did a ton with it. And a big reason for that is because they knew how to work around a budget. They knew what they were going to do, and they just went and did it. And they had the right people for the right project, and they were there at the right time. You had Tom Savini, who at this point wasn't quite yet unattainable for low budget filmmakers because he was affordable, and you had him in his prime as well, so you really got the most out of his involvement. There's a reason why a lot of people find the effects to be some of the best that he's ever done, and that's because there was a lot of stuff that he had to do, and he had to do it on a low budget, had to do it quick, had to do it dirty, but did it in a way that still looked really impressive. I mean, the headshot with the shotgun blast, one of the best shotgun blasts you will ever see. I don't know why I laughed at that at any point in my life. Maybe it's because I was so uncomfortable watching the movie. It was just one of those kind of reactions. I definitely did not laugh watching that in 4K. I winced. It was a very wince-inducing sequence to sit through, and that had to be really surreal for Tom because he was the one shooting himself in the head in that scene. Yeah, great effects by Tom Savini. A absolutely memorable and iconic poster I mean, one of the most iconic poster art that I can think of when it comes to a horror film. Like, you see this poster and you're like, I want to see this movie. And it's also one of those posters that's not misleading. It doesn't lie to you. It isn't like, hey, this looks awesome, right? That's not in the movie. There's none of that. Like, you see this poster, that does happen. People get scalped, and there's a maniac. So it's not anything that's misleading advertising, and it's just as awesome as the rest of the film is. And it's just a movie that really does work. It gets under your skin, it's unnerving, it's memorable, it's iconic in so many different ways, and I cannot recommend it enough when it comes to the horror genre. And yeah, it goes by at a good pace too, because it's only an hour and 20 something minutes, so it never really loses any steam. It never really gets to the point where you get bored with it and you want to shut it off. And I think the film got a really unfair bad rap from critics when it came out because it made them uncomfortable and they didn't like that. Gene Siskel in particular really railed hard against this movie. Uh, he didn't even finish the film. Like, how the fuck can you actually make a viable review of this movie if you didn't even finish it? He walked out after the shotgun blast scene. And then he had the audacity to tear this film down and do all this other stuff. And he didn't even finish the movie. He's also a big reason why the film's brilliant advertising never really made it past a trial run. And it really was a brilliant bit of advertising. What the producers decided to do is they had these little mini projection screens with like the film's branding, and they would put them up outside the theaters, and they would play clips of the film. They would play clips of the violent scenes in Maniac. And it was a brilliant idea. It was another instance of this film being way ahead of its time. And Gene Siskel absolutely destroyed the film and said it was abhorrent and blah 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 blah. And he even specifically pointed out that advertising campaign, and that's why it never really made it past its initial first run. And I think that would have been really, really cool to have seen that employed for other films, other horror films. It was a really cool, ahead of its time concept. It's like showing a trailer outside the theater instead of just having a poster. I thought that was a cool idea. It's like having clips on the internet before the film comes out to get people interested in seeing the movie. So I thought that was unique. And in a lot of ways, the film is unique and one of its kind when it comes to everything that goes on within it, the perspective of focusing on the killer and putting you in the shoes of the killer. And yeah, it's a terrific film. I think it doesn't really get enough credit sometimes, and I think that over the years it has gotten a lot more of a following and it has gotten more respect, and I'm really glad that's the case. But I think there are still a lot of people who think it's just some cheap exploitation film, and I think that's unfair to the movie. Just because it doesn't have a ton of subtext, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have merit. It creates a mood and an atmosphere that is second to none in a lot of ways when it comes to this genre. Like, it really does make you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel uneasy. It makes you feel unsafe. And that's exactly what a horror film, at least one that's trying to be more serious and less fun, is supposed to do. But anyway, that is my review of Maniac, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.